The day Rose Carter first saw the horse, she noticed something strange. The horse was standing in the middle of a burning prairie. Fire was raging all around him, but he didn't move. He didn't try to run. He didn't paw at the ground. He didn't even whinny. He simply stared at an old wooden well standing several dozen yards away, as if he were waiting for someone. Rose pulled her horse to a stop. The flames were already spreading through the dry grass. The wind was driving the fire straight toward her. "Come on," Rose shouted. She pulled hard on the reins, but her chestnut mare was terrified by the smoke and backed away. Rose looked ahead again. The black stallion stood there alone. The ring of fire was slowly closing around him, and then something happened that Rose would never be able to explain, even many years later. The stallion lifted his head. He looked directly at her and walked toward the well, not away from the fire, toward it. Rose felt a chill run through her, because she knew this place. She knew it far too well, and she knew there shouldn't have been any secrets left at that old well. Her father had died there 12 years ago. At least that's what she'd been told. But in that moment, Rose thought for the first time, what if they had lied to her? Within 2 hours earlier, she had been riding home. The ranch lay in a valley between two long mountain ridges, where the wind never seemed to stop completely. She was 30 years old, and for the past 10 years, she'd done everything she could to avoid coming back here. But after her mother's death, she had no choice. The Carter Ranch had belonged to her family for almost 70 years. Now it belonged to Rose. Or rather, what was left of it did. Debts, an old house, 30 horses, and land that a neighboring ranch owner had wanted to buy for years. Rose arrived at sunset. She planned to spend the night, inspect the property in the morning, and decide what to do next. But at the gate, she was met by the old ranch manager, Tom Bell. He stood there holding a lantern. "You shouldn't have come alone." Rose stepped down from the saddle. "Good evening, Tom." He didn't smile. "I'm serious." "So am I." She looked toward the ranch. The house seemed smaller than she remembered. The old porch, cracks in the walls, a crooked barn, and far beyond it, a dark line of hills. Tom said nothing. Then he spoke. "You need to leave before morning." Rose looked at him. "Why?" "Because Caleb Ward is coming here tomorrow." She frowned. The name sounded familiar. Very familiar. Caleb Ward owned the largest ranch in the county. His father had once been friends with Rose's father. Then the two men had stopped speaking. "What does he want?" "The land. It's not for sale." Tom looked her in the eyes. "He already considers it his." Rose gave a small laugh. "Then he's going to be disappointed." Tom didn't answer. He simply looked somewhere over her shoulder. "There's something else." "What?" "A horse." Rose turned. "What horse?" "A black one." "We don't have any black horses." "We do now." "Where did it come from?" Tom tightened his grip on the lantern. "No one knows." Rose felt a strange uneasiness. "What happened to it?" Tom hesitated. "It killed a man." Within the next morning, Rose saw the stallion. He stood in the farthest paddock. Huge, black as wet stone. A small white crescent-shaped mark on his forehead. They called him Raven. That's what the ranch hands had named him. But no one knew where he had come from. 3 months earlier, he had simply appeared at the ranch gates. Wounded, starving, a deep cut running along his side. Tom had ordered the gates opened. The stallion walked inside, but he allowed only one man to come near him. The old stableman, Jack. The next day, Jack was dead. They found him beside the paddock. His ribs were broken. After that, no one tried to tame Raven. They simply left him alone. Raven lifted his head and froze. She stopped. There were about 20 yards between them. The stallion stared directly at her. Not threateningly, not fearfully, almost as if he recognized her. Rose felt goosebumps rise across her skin. "Do you know me?" Raven slowly lowered his head and took a step. Rose didn't move. Another step, then another. The stallion stopped, only 10 feet from the fence. Rose reached out her hand. Tom, standing behind her, suddenly said, "Don't." She didn't pull her hand back. Why? Because Jack did the same thing. Rose looked at Raven. "What happened?" Tom looked away. He said the horse was trying to show him something. "What?" "The old well." Rose froze. She knew that well. It was where her father's body had been found. Sick. 12 years ago, Rose's father had gone out one evening to check the water pipes. He never came back. The next morning, they found him dead beside the well. Rose had been 18. They told her a horse had panicked and thrown him. She believed them, because she wanted to believe them. Then her mother forbade her from asking questions. A few months later, she sold almost all the horses. Rose left, and never came back. Until today. "What exactly did Jack say?" she asked. Tom remained silent. "Tom," he said. Raven stared at the well every evening. "And?" "One day, Jack followed him there." Rose felt a weight settle in her chest. "What did he see?" "I don't know." "Why?" Tom looked at her. "Because Jack came back a different man. Sick." That night, Rose couldn't sleep. She sat at her father's desk, in the old study. In front of her lay the land documents, bills, debts, old letters, and a photograph. She found it completely by accident. The photograph was yellowed with age. It showed her father, young, smiling, standing beside an unfamiliar woman. And behind them stood a black stallion. Rose moved the lamp closer. Her heart began to pound. On the back of the photograph was a date, 30 years ago. But Raven looked exactly the same. The same white mark on his forehead. The same broad chest. The same eyes. Rose turned the photograph over. On the back, only 4 words had been written. "He knows where it is." She read them again. Then once more. There was a knock at the door. Rose quickly hid the photograph. Tom entered the room. "Caleb Ward is here." "Let him in." "He didn't come alone." "I don't care." Tom hesitated. "Rose." "What?" "If he offers you money, think carefully." "I already have." "He's offering enough to let you start a completely new life." Rose looked at him. "What if I don't want a new one?" Tom sighed. "Then at least be careful." Sick. Caleb Ward was a tall man in his mid-40s, gray at the temples, an expensive jacket, a calm voice, and the eyes of a man who was used to getting what he wanted. He walked in without waiting for an invitation. "Rose, Caleb, you've grown, and you've gotten older." Tom coughed, hiding a smile. Caleb sat down. "I want to make you an offer." "No." He hadn't even finished speaking. "You don't know what I was going to say." "The land." He smiled. "Smart. It's not for sale. Your ranch owes me money." "How much?" Caleb pulled out some papers. Rose looked at them, and immediately understood. The debt was real, but her father's signature had been forged. She looked up. "This isn't his signature." Caleb's smile disappeared. 12 years have passed. "I know. You were a child. I knew my father's handwriting. You were 18. I was his daughter." Caleb took the papers back. "You have 30 days." "For what?" "To pay me back." "And if I don't?" He looked at her. "Then the ranch becomes mine." He stood. At the door he stopped. "And one more thing." "What?" "Stay away from the old well." Rose felt a chill run through her. "Why?" For the first time, Caleb looked directly into her eyes. Because your father already went there. He walked out. That night, Raven disappeared. Rose discovered it around midnight. The gates were closed. The lock was intact, but the stallion was gone. She grabbed a lantern. Tom tried to stop her. Don't go. Where? He looked toward the hills. You know where. Rose saddled her mare and rode out. 20 minutes later, she saw Raven. He was standing beside the old well. Moonlight fell across his back. Rose dismounted. Raven. The stallion turned his head, then took a step backward. Rose followed him. He stopped beside the well, looked down, and struck the ground with his hoof. Once, twice, 3 times. Rose dropped to her knees. The earth beside the stone wall was loose. She began digging through it with her bare hands. Something glinted beneath her fingers. Metal. She pulled out a small copper locket. Her father's initials were engraved on it. But the most terrifying part was what was inside. A tiny photograph. It showed her father and Caleb Ward. They were standing beside the same well, and between them lay a man. Rose felt as if she couldn't breathe. Raven gave a quiet whinny, then suddenly turned his head. Something was moving among the trees. Rose stood. Who's there? No answer. She pulled out her knife. Footsteps drew closer. Raven suddenly stepped between Rose and the trees. A gunshot rang out. The horse flinched. Rose fell to the ground. A second shot. The stone beside her head shattered. Raven charged forward. A man screamed in the darkness. Then came the sound of pounding hooves. And suddenly, silence. Rose lay completely still. A few seconds later, she got to her feet. Raven stood several yards away. Blood covered his shoulder. The bullet had grazed him. You. Rose walked toward him. The stallion didn't move away. She placed her hand against his neck, and for the first time, Raven lowered his head onto her shoulder. Winnow. Tom found them together the next morning. Rose was sitting beside the horse. Raven lay nearby. Now you understand why I wanted you to leave? She looked at him. Who shot at us? Tom said nothing. You know? He looked away. I only know that your father didn't die by accident. Rose froze. What? I was there. When? That night. She slowly stood. You saw him? Tom nodded. Your father. And why did you stay silent? Because I was ordered to. By whom? Tom closed his eyes. Caleb. Winnow. The truth finally came out. 12 years earlier, Rose's father had discovered that Caleb was illegally stealing horses from neighboring properties. He was planning to report him to the authorities, but he never got the chance. That night, they met beside the old well. Caleb hadn't come alone. A fight broke out. Rose's father was struck. He fell. Caleb thought he was dead. Tom had witnessed everything, but Caleb threatened to kill Tom's family if he ever spoke. So Tom remained silent, and together they made it look like an accident. Then why did Raven stay silent all these years? Rose asked. Tom looked at the stallion. Because a horse can't speak. But he tried to show me. Yes. How did he know? Tom shook his head. I don't know. Rose looked at Raven again, and then she noticed something else. There was an old leather strap around his neck. She stepped closer. Beneath the strap was a small metal plate. A single letter was engraved on it. K. Caleb. But that was impossible, because Rose's father had never owned a horse like this. At least, that's what she had always been told. 2 days later, Caleb returned. This time, he brought 2 armed men with him. You found the locket. It wasn't a question. Rose stood on the porch. Yes. Give it to me. No. Then I'll take it. Try. He smirked. You're just like your father." Those words changed everything. Rose felt a cold fury rising inside her. "What did you say?" "I said you're like him." "You know what I found?" Caleb said nothing. "I found proof." "Proof of what?" "That you were there." Caleb looked at Tom, and Tom understood. He stepped back. "Rose." But it was too late. One of Caleb's men raised his weapon. Raven slammed his hoof against the gate. The stallion suddenly charged across the yard. He crashed his shoulder into the armed man. The man went down. The second man fired. The bullet passed inches from Rose's head. She ran into the house. Caleb shouted, "Find the locket." Rose raced upstairs. But instead of hiding, she opened her father's old chest. Inside were documents, letters, and a map. She unfolded it. The old well was marked on the map, but not with an X, with an arrow. The arrow pointed. Underground. Well, Rose suddenly understood everything. The old well wasn't just a well. Long ago, there had been an underground storage room beneath it. Her father had used it to hide valuable documents. And if those papers had survived, there could be evidence. Evidence that could destroy Caleb. Rose grabbed a lantern. Raven was already standing at the door. She climbed onto his back. "Show me." The stallion took off toward the hills. Caleb saw them. After them. Well, they reached the well. Rose jumped down. Raven struck the stones with his hoof. One of the stones shifted. Beneath it was a metal hatch. Rose opened it. A ladder led down into the darkness. She climbed inside. Raven remained above. The air below smelled of damp earth. Rose walked several yards. The lantern illuminated a row of wooden crates. She opened the first. Empty. The second. Old tools. The third. Documents. Dozens of them. She grabbed the first sheet. Contracts. Signatures. Names. Horses. Dates. Proof that Caleb had been stealing animals for years. Rose smiled. She had won. But then she heard a sound. Above her. Someone was coming down the ladder. Rose. Caleb. She blew out the lantern. Darkness swallowed the room. "Give me the documents." Rose said nothing. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. Your father was a fool, and you're a murderer." Silence. Then Caleb spoke. "He shouldn't have found out." Rose felt her heart pound harder. "So you admit it?" "He forced me to." "By doing what?" "He wanted to take everything from me. It was his ranch." "No," Caleb snapped. "It was supposed to be mine." Rose heard a step. He was getting closer. She backed away. A knife was clenched in her hand. But Caleb was faster. He grabbed her. The lantern fell. The documents scattered across the floor. "You ruined everything." "No." Rose smiled. "You ruined everything yourself." Caleb froze. Then came the sound of pounding hooves from above. Raven. He was striking the hatch with his hooves. Caleb looked up. "That damn horse." Rose drove her elbow into him. He let go. She ran. Caleb grabbed her by the dress. The fabric tore. Rose fell to the ground. And at that exact moment, the hatch above them was ripped open. Raven slammed his hoof into it. Stones came crashing down. Caleb stumbled backward. Rose got to her feet. She saw the light and ran toward it. Raven climbed higher along the mountain trail. Rose held onto his mane, while little Mary wrapped her arms tightly around Rose's waist. None of them knew where they were going. Only the horse knew. He didn't look back. He didn't stop. He didn't hesitate. The sun had already disappeared behind the mountains when the trail became so narrow that Rose had to press herself against the rock. "Raven, where are you taking us?" The stallion didn't even slow down. Mary whispered, What if he's lost? Rose looked ahead. He's not lost. She didn't know why she was so certain, but she was. A few minutes later, Raven stopped. A small valley opened up before them, and Rose froze. In the center of the valley stood an old wooden house. The windows were dark. The roof was almost completely covered with grass, but 3 buckets stood beside the porch. One of them was filled with fresh water. Fresh apples lay beside it. Rose slowly dismounted. Someone lives here. Raven gave a quiet snort. Mary jumped down from the horse. Who? Rose didn't answer. She walked toward the house. The door was slightly open. Inside, the air smelled of smoke and fresh bread. It was impossible. The house looked as though it had been abandoned for years. Rose pushed the door open. Is anyone here? Silence. She took 1 step inside, then another. A cup sat on the table. There was still warm tea inside it. Rose touched it with her fingers. Someone was here. Suddenly, a horse whinnied outside. Raven stepped back sharply. Rose rushed outside. On the opposite slope stood another horse. Gray. Old. It was staring directly at Raven, and Raven was staring back. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then the gray horse turned and disappeared into the trees. Raven suddenly charged after it. Raven. Rose jumped onto his back. Mary climbed on behind her. They raced through the forest, across a stream, up the mountainside, and suddenly a woman appeared ahead of them. She stood in the middle of the trail. Gray hair, an old coat, a wooden walking stick in her hand. Rose pulled Raven to a stop. The woman looked at her, then at Mary, and finally at the stallion. Her expression changed. It can't be. Rose dismounted. You know this horse? The woman didn't answer. She walked toward Raven. The stallion lowered his head. The woman touched his forehead and began to cry. He came back. Rose felt a wave of unease. Who are you? The woman looked at her. My name is Evelyn. You live here? For 20 years. Rose frowned. Alone? Evelyn looked at Mary. Not anymore. Mary hid behind Rose. What do you mean? Evelyn was silent for a long time. Then she said, 20 years ago, your father brought me here. Rose felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. You knew my father? Better than you think. What happened? Evelyn looked toward the mountains. He saved my life. Rose was silent. From whom? Evelyn answered. From my husband. What is it? 20 years ago, Evelyn had been very different. Young. Married. She had a little daughter. Her husband was a violent man. He drank. He abused her. One night, Evelyn ran away. She took her daughter and 1 horse, but her husband found them. They ended up in the mountains. The road was covered in snow. The horse panicked. The wagon overturned. The little girl disappeared into the forest. Evelyn searched for her all night, and in the morning she found her. But her husband was already there. He was holding the girl by the hand, and he was about to take her back. Then Rose's father appeared. He was riding a horse, a black stallion. He saw what was happening, and he intervened. Evelyn's husband fired a shot. The bullet passed inches from Rose's father's head, but he still managed to get the girl away. Evelyn ran after them. They disappeared into the mountains. And then something happened that Rose had never known. Her father told Evelyn, if you want your daughter to be safe, stay here. He found an old house for them. He left food. He brought medicine. And then one day he said, I'll come back. But he never did. Rose felt a lump in her throat. Why? Evelyn lowered her eyes. Because your father died. Yes. No. Rose froze. What? Evelyn looked directly into her eyes. He didn't die then. Rose couldn't speak. What did you say? Your father was alive, but they found him dead. They didn't find him. Rose stepped back. Then who did they find? Evelyn shook her head. I don't know. Rose felt a chill spread through her entire body. All these years, her whole life, had been built on a lie. Why did you keep silent? Evelyn closed her eyes. Because he asked me to. Why? He said that if people learned he was alive, others would die. Rose looked at Mary. Who? Evelyn didn't answer. At that moment, a sound came from outside. The pounding of hooves. Many horses. Evelyn suddenly stood. They found us. Who? Caleb's men. Rose grabbed Mary's hand. How many? At least 6. Raven struck the ground with his hoof. Evelyn walked to the window. Leave through the back trail. What about you? I'll stay. No. Rose, listen to me. Evelyn grabbed her by the shoulder. Your father didn't leave you money. What? He left you people. Rose didn't understand. Evelyn pointed toward the mountains. People live here whom he once helped. Suddenly, a whistle came from the forest. One, then another, and then lanterns appeared in the darkness among the trees. Evelyn smiled. They've come. Wills. The first to appear was an old man riding a gray horse. Behind him came a woman carrying a rifle. Then 3 more riders. Rose stared at them, confused. Evelyn stepped forward. This is Carter's daughter. Everyone looked at Rose. The old man dismounted. We've been waiting for you. Why? He answered. Because your father said that one day you would return. Rose felt tears fill her eyes. He knew? He always knew. Wills. But then a gunshot rang out. One of the riders fell. Panic erupted. Caleb. He had come himself. With his men. They surrounded the valley. Rose, he shouted. You were supposed to sell the ranch. She stepped out of the house. And you were supposed to leave my family alone. Caleb smirked. Your father was just as stubborn. Where is he? Caleb stopped smiling. Dead. Are you sure? He said nothing. Rose took a step forward. Because today I learned that the man who was buried instead of him wasn't my father. Caleb went pale. That was enough. Rose understood. He knew. Where is my father? Caleb said nothing. Evelyn whispered. Rose. Then a voice came from behind the house. Old. Hoarse. But familiar. Don't ask him. Rose froze. Raven raised his head. Mary stopped breathing. Everyone turned. A man stepped out of the darkness. Gray-haired. Thin. Leaning on a cane. An old scar crossed his face. Rose stared at him. The world seemed to disappear. She knew that voice. She remembered it from childhood. She remembered his laughter. The way he used to call her his little girl. The way he used to say, Never be afraid of a horse. Be afraid of the man who makes a horse afraid. Rose whispered, Dad? The man stopped. His eyes filled with tears. Forgive me, Rose. She didn't move. Then she ran. And for the first time in 20 years, her father held his daughter in his arms. Wills. But the reunion didn't last long. Caleb raised his weapon. Raven was faster. He charged forward. He slammed into Caleb with his chest. The gun flew from his hand. Evelyn's people surrounded the others. Within minutes, it was over. Caleb lay on the ground, defeated. Rose's father stood beside her. She looked at him. Why didn't you come back? He was silent for a long time, because Caleb was trying to find everyone I had helped. You could have written. If I had, he would have found you. I thought you were dead. I know. I hated you. He nodded. You had every right to. Rose began to cry. I waited for you. He placed a hand on her head. So did I. A few months later, Rose returned to her ranch. But this time, she wasn't alone. Her father came with her. So did Evelyn. Mary stayed with Rose. And Raven became the main horse of the ranch. He was no longer wild. But he never became completely tame either. He had simply chosen his family. One evening, Rose stood beside the old paddock. Her father walked up to her. "Do you know why he came to you?" She looked at Raven. "Why?" "Because your mother once saved his mother's life." Rose smiled. "So it all began before me." "Yes." Her father looked toward the sunset. Horses remember what people forget. Rose placed her hand on Raven's neck. The stallion gave a quiet snort. Then he rested his head against her shoulder. She closed her eyes. And for the first time in 20 years, she felt that she had truly come home. But the most astonishing thing happened the next morning. Rose stepped outside. Raven was standing by the gate. Beside him lay an old child's toy, a small wooden horse. Carved into it were the initials, RC. Rose picked it up. "Dad?" He stepped onto the porch. He saw it, and went pale. "Where did you find that?" "Raven brought it." Her father slowly approached. He took the toy, ran his fingers over the carved letters, and quietly said, "I thought that was lost forever." "Whose is it?" He looked at Rose. "Yours. But I've never seen it." Her father smiled through his tears. "You were too young." Rose looked at Raven. The stallion stood calmly by the gate. And then she understood. He hadn't simply led her into the mountains. All this time, he had been bringing her past back to her, one lost thing at a time, one person at a time. And perhaps that was why the old horse had never allowed anyone to come close to him. He wasn't waiting for an owner. He was waiting for his family. And when Rose finally returned, Raven knew he no longer had to wait.